In this tutorial, I'm going to talk to you guys about for loops in Python. In the last tutorial, you learned about while loops. You learned that we use while loops to execute a block of code multiple times. In Python, we have another kind of loop that is a for loop, and we use that to iterate over items of a collection, such as a string, because a string is a sequence of characters. So it looks like a collection. So we can use a for loop to iterate over each character in a string and then do something with it. Here's an example. We type out for, then we define a variable. This is what we call a loop variable. In each iteration, this variable will hold one item. So let's call it item. In here, we type out a string like Python and then colon. So with this for loop, we can iterate over this string. And in each iteration, this item variable will hold one character at a time. In the first iteration, it will be set to P. Then in the second iteration, it will be set to Y. In the third iteration, it will be set to T, and so on. Okay? So here we are inside our for block because of the indentation here. So whatever we type here will be executed in each iteration. For now, we can simply print this item. Now, let's run this program and see what happens. So you can see each character in our string is printed on a new line. Let's look at another example. In Python, we can define lists using square brackets. So let me remove this string from here and define a list using square brackets. A list is simply a list of items, like a list of numbers, a list of customers, a list of emails, products, blog posts, whatever. So here we can define a list of names like Mosh, John, Sarah, and then go ahead, run our program. So you can see in each iteration, we get one name and print it on a new line. We can also loop over a list of numbers. For example, 1, 2, 3, 4. Let's run it. Again, we see each number on a new line. But what if we want to iterate over a large list of numbers? We don't want to explicitly type out a list with, let's say, 100 or 1,000 numbers. We don't want to type 5, 6, 7, all the way to 100. That is when we use the range function. So let me delete this. In Python, we have a built-in function called range for creating a range of numbers. So we give it a number, let's say 10. Let's run this program. Now we can see here on the terminal, we have numbers 0 all the way to 9. So 10 is not included. So basically, when we call the range function, this range function creates an object. It's not a list, it's a special kind of object that we can iterate over. In each iteration, this object will spit out a new number. We can also work with a range of numbers here. Let's say we want to start from 5 and go all the way to 10. So let's run our program. Now we have the numbers 5, 6, 7, and 9. Also, this range function can optionally take a step. So we can pass 2 as the step to this function. And when we run our program, you can see that our first number is 5. Now we go 2 steps forward to get 7. Once again, we go 2 steps forward, we get 9, and that is the end of our range. So this is the basics of using for loops in Python. Now here's an exercise for you. I want you to write a program to calculate the total cost of all the items in a shopping cart. So let's say we have a list of prices like 10, 20, and 30. I want you to use a for loop to calculate the total cost of all the items in our imaginary shopping cart. So calculate that and then print it on a terminal. That's pretty easy, and you should do it in a couple of minutes. So as you learned, we use for loops to iterate over all the items in a collection. A collection can be a string, it can be a list, it can be a range object that is returned from the range function, anything, any kind of object that has multiple items. So in this example, we're going to use a for loop to iterate over the list of prices. So for item in prices, colon, and by the way, this loop variable, we don't have to call this item. We can call it anything. For example, in this case, we can rename it to price. So for price in prices. Now in each iteration, this price will hold one value. In the first iteration, it's going to hold 10, then it's going to be 20, and then it's going to be 30. So we need to define another variable to calculate the total. So We define that outside of our for loop. Let's call it total. And initially, we set it to 0. Now, in each iteration, we get the current price and add it to the total. So we write total equals total plus price. Or, as you learned earlier, we can use the augmented assignment operator to simplify this code. So after our for loop, this total variable has the total of all the prices. We can simply print it here, or we can use a formatted string. So a string prefixed with f. We add a label like total, curly braces, to dynamically include some value in our string. In this case, our total variable. So let's go ahead and run this program. There you go. So the total cost of all the items in our imaginary shopping cart is 60.